I'm here on High Bridge in Farmville, Virginia, and you can see it behind me there. You can see the structure that's been built into a park. You can also see where the bridge used to be on those columns there behind me. This bridge was built back in the 1800s, about 1850, and only 10 years after it was built, the Civil War had a huge impact. While it was meant to bring supplies all across Virginia, during the Civil War, it was moving Army supplies back and forth. And so the Confederates were trying to get from one side of this valley to another, and they were using this bridge, and the Union Army tried to burn it down. The Confederates were able to stop them, but the very next day after the whole Confederate Army crossed with all of their supplies, they themselves burned it down to isolate themselves from the Union Army on the other side. Burning bridges has a way of isolating us. And if we're not careful, we don't just have to burn bridges, just the lack of maintenance can make these bridges isolated. You can see in this walkway they've replaced some boards. It's just normal maintenance that they have to do all the time. Bridges that we drive over every day that we take for granted, that cross over rivers, that cross over other roads and things, they require maintenance or they will be destroyed. But we have a saying that we use a lot of times. We talk about burning bridges, destroying structures to separate ourselves from one another. And when we say it, we're usually talking about ending relationships in a kind of permanent and final action. Sometimes we do damage relationships. Other times we leave no way of repairing them because we purposely cut off communication because we're angry or upset at another person. Sometimes we just don't do any maintenance, and those bridges, those relationships fall apart. That can happen among friends and family, but it's not meant to happen in the church. Jesus gives us instructions on how to avoid burning bridges. Matthew chapter 5, verse 23 and 24, he talks about if you have offended somebody, if you've damaged a relationship because you've sinned against someone else, you should seek forgiveness. And then in Matthew chapter 18, verses 15 and following, he talks about if a brother or a sister has sinned against you, seek them out and let them know. And it's all with the goal of repairing relationships so that these relational bridges are not burned down. Now, if we're all committed to bridges, if we're all committed to one another in our relationships in Christ, then those bridges will not need to come down. We won't be always burning bridges. If we're always looking for ways to forgive one another and be closer to one another, these bridges won't have to come down. And that type of work is sometimes difficult. Sometimes it's painful to maintain our relationships, especially if somebody has hurt us. But we don't want simple things that are resolvable issues to become bigger and bigger problems. We need to be careful in our relationships and in the maintenance of our relationships to keep those bridges fully functional. And when you have a bridge that is fully functional, you get something that's beautiful from all different perspectives. You can stand on this bridge and you can see all over the place. Sometimes they open it up at night and you can see the fireflies and the stars. If you come here early enough in the morning, you can see a lot of the wildlife coming through here. And really, this bridge is no longer thought of as something that's connecting two places. It's really just thought of as part of a unified trail. It's not just something that if we lost, we would be separated. It's something that if we're not careful, we can take for granted. But it's something that's beautiful. Ephesians 4:32 talks about our oneness in Christ, and we can be one in Christ when we are united, and we're always working to maintain our relationships. Ephesians 4:32 gives us a command: be kind and tender-hearted to one another, forgiving one another, just as in Christ God forgave you. That's something that we all need to work towards, as we are one in Christ, part of the one body, the one baptism, the one faith, serving the one God. Peter also says in 1 Peter 3:8, finally, all of you have unity of mind, sympathy, brotherly love, a tender heart, and a humble mind. Let's not be isolated from one another. I know we are separated more than we have been in the past, but we have ways of communicating to one another. Let's continue to maintain our relationships and not lose track of one another. We don't want our bridges to be in disarray when we are able to meet again. So I encourage you to do everything you can to reach out to your brothers and sisters, so that when we get back, we will still have these beautiful relationships in Christ.